As you become more experienced in Photoshop, you'll find that you'll want to use different groups of panels for performing different tasks. It will be helpful to customize these panel locations and be able to save them. Now, by default, we're in the Essentials workspace, but you can see that Photoshop ships with additional workspaces. For example, there's a 3D, an emotion, a painting workspace, a photography workspace, and a typography workspace. And we can create our own workspaces and then save them out as new workspaces. So let's do that. I'm just going to arrange my panels in the way that I prefer to work with them when I'm doing my compositing. Since I use the color picker, I don't need my color and swatches panels to take up space, so I'll use the context-sensitive menus and close this tab group. On the Mac, I would hold down the Control key and click on the tab. On Windows, it's a right mouse click. I also don't need my adjustments or my styles showing because I can access all of my adjustment layers at the bottom of the Layers panel. So again, I'll use that context-sensitive menu and close the entire tab group. Now I want to remove my Layers panel from the Channels and Paths grouping, so I'll click and drag on the panel title and then just drag it to the bottom, and when I see that solid blue line, I'll release the mouse and that will put the Layers panel in its own grouping. Now I typically like the paths to show up before channels, so I'll just click and drag over to the left. And I like to nest my History panel with my Layers panel, so I'll bring that down. Now I won't release when there's that line between them, but instead I'll position my cursor on top of the Layers panel and then release in order to nest the History and the Layers panel together. We also have the Properties panel. This is a very important panel when I'm working with adjustment layers, so I also want to make sure that this is visible, but I want it in its own grouping, so I'll click and drag all the way down below the Layers panel. I see that solid cyan line, and then release. And there's a reason that I put the Properties panel below the Layers panel. When I add an adjustment layer, usually I'll add it from the bottom of the Layers panel, and after I add the adjustment layer, my cursor is already down here in the Properties area where I can then make changes to the adjustment layer that I added. So it's just a convenient location, and that's where I like it. Now, the paths and channels, I don't need them taking up all of this space by default, so I'll double click on the Paths tab, and that will just collapse it. Of course, if I wanted any additional panels, I could select them from the Window menu, and then I could reposition them as needed. For now, this is all I'm going to work with, so I'll choose to save a new workspace, and I'll just call this JK Demo. And I have the option to also save any keyboard shortcuts that I've made and any changes that I've made to the menus. In this case, I'll save the keyboard shortcuts and then click Save. Now, when I return back to the Essentials workspace, you can see that nothing actually changed with my panels because Photoshop is taking me back to the last arrangement in Essentials. But if I wanted to reset Essentials, I could click and just choose Reset Essentials. And if you've ever created a workspace that you no longer need or want, just make sure that it's not the active workspace, so it doesn't have the check mark next to it, and then choose Delete Workspace. And as long as it wasn't the active workspace, you will see it in the list here. So I'll choose JK Demo, tap Delete, confirm that I do want it deleted, and now we can see that my workspace is no longer an option. So there we go, a very quick way to create your own custom workspace that you could use for the different tasks that you do.